Hi, so this topic actually came up recently in a conversation with a couple of friends, and so I thought I would sort of share some of the experience that I've had with respect to this. How can one tell the difference between the ego versus that calling, that inner knowing from the higher self? And it's a tough one, right? I mean, it's something that I know I've struggled with for, God, most of my life, actually. But, for me, it comes up most often when I'm feeling that tension around a choice or a decision that I have to make. And I feel myself like literally and figuratively sort of pulled in two directions. I see that there are options and I'm not sure what the right choice is, what's the right thing to do. And I can come up with good reasons for choice A versus choice B. And I'm feeling very indecisive, for example. And that indecision in of itself is, not necessarily bad. It can actually be pretty helpful sometimes to allow ourselves the opportunity to sit in a question. Maybe it's a big choice. Maybe it's something that's important to us. Maybe it's something that we don't want to just react to. We want to respond. But this video isn't really just about the nuances of allowing ourselves to take time with decisions. It's also about how uncomfortable it feels when we're stuck in that indecisive place. And importantly, that feeling of being stuck, right? And of not knowing, right? And I hear a lot of people, and I can relate to this directly, sort of describe it as like not really knowing how to trust themselves or trust their decision making because it feels like they're of two minds of an issue and they really want to sort it out. So it came up in a conversation and I was reminded of an anecdote for myself that in my own experience that really brought this to a head. And I know personally I sort of will come back to this this memory for myself whenever I'm in that place where I don't know what to do, right? And I think too long didn't read. The answer really is you can tell the difference because when your ego or your small self is the one who's talking, it almost always brings up a lot of anxiety. The line of reasoning that part of you is bringing up is usually trying to convince you to stay smaller, is trying to talk you out of something important, or is beating or criticizing you to the point that you're feeling a lot of anxiety with not choosing the option that it's telling you to do. Right? You should really do that thing, right? Whereas when it's coming from your higher self or that inner knowing, in my experience, and I've heard this from countless others too, there's a real sense of calm. A real ease, a real peace with the answer that's provided. And the difficulty is sometimes it's an answer maybe we don't want, and so that's why we're not really gravitating towards it. But anyway, to my anecdote to help kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. So I was living in Morocco, working at a surf camp. The life, oh my God, it was amazing. And I was loving my time there. I was loving surfing. I was loving Morocco. I was loving the people that I was living with. I was loving everything about my life. And one day when I was out surfing and not paying attention, as almost always happens when there's a lesson that's about to be received from me, I had an accident and I really seriously injured my left knee. Like I tripped and fell, and I for those of you that are squeamish, I apologize. I literally felt like my whole leg had separated from itself. I mean, this was like a very serious injury. I couldn't swim back to shore. My friends, dragged me back in. My leg was swelling up as the days progressed. And my immediate thoughts, besides shock, were, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do now? A family member of mine had a really serious ACL injury. So I know that, when you tear something down there, like it can be months of recovery. And I was thinking like, I can't have torn something in Morocco. I don't have health insurance. First off, how am I going to do this? How am I going to afford this? How am I ever going to use my leg again? Because keep in mind, I could hardly walk on it. My family there, my chosen family there, was very good about getting me to the hospital relatively quickly, and we did a quick x-ray and we confirmed that nothing was broken. But the swelling was pretty bad, and it was going to take us a while before I would be able to get an MRI to confirm if anything had torn or not. And so in those days of like waiting for the swelling to go down enough that I could get an MRI, I was in a state. Like, to put it mildly, like, I was miserable. And everyone who was around me probably knew it as well, because I was feeling really torn. I was feeling really indecisive about what to do. On the one hand, obviously, like, I was happy where I was, and I felt really, really bummed that I couldn't surf. But another part of me was like, am I in danger of jeopardizing my ability to walk for the rest of my life? Like, I had also, this was at the start of some of my travels, and I'd only been away for a couple months at that point. And I was really upset that I wasn't going to be able to travel more, but the weight of potentially having really seriously done something wrong, and the pressure of I was being irresponsible by not thinking about this more seriously, and what was I going to do, and all the rest of it was really, really weighing on me. And of course, whenever I thought about the prospect of having really damaged my knee, and needing to go for therapy or physical therapy, or even, God forbid, having to get an operation, the feelings were always anxious, like major panic attack level anxious, like not just, oh my God, have I done something very serious in injuring myself, but also to like, crazy inane stuff like how I was going to get on the plane to go back home, and like where was I going to get treatment, and how was I going to do it right. It was just spin, like a million different problems that I obviously had to solve immediately. So it was a couple of days of this, of feeling really terrible, understandably terrible. Before, I think I just got fed up. I think I just sort of was like, I can't be upset about this anymore. I have to decide. I have to figure this out. And I remember very distinctly, I was, everyone else had gone out for the day. They were all surfing, and I was sitting in the common area looking at the beach. And something inside me just asked, it was like, so what do you want to have happen? And I understood that very, sort of instinctually as meaning, what do you want if you could have it all your way? Assuming you had a magic wand and you could just bibbity boppity boop it, right again, like what would you do? What would be the thing you'd want to do? And I took a deep breath, and I was like, I want to go surfing again. I want to stay here. I want to live here. This is what I want to do. I want to do this more than anything. I want to stay. I want to be able to surf again. I want to be able to do this. And in saying that, in admitting to myself, I obviously had no idea how I was going to do that. How was not a part of that answer. I had intentionally set aside how for a moment, and I just focused on like why did I want anything? What was I feeling? What were the feelings around what was coming up for me? And it was very clear. I wanted this life. I wanted this life because it made me feel good, and I loved surfing every day, and I felt strong and powerful when I wasn't injuring myself. And I wanted that back. I wanted it back desperately. And I was finally, because I was willing to, for those 5 seconds that I asked myself that question, to stop fixating on how. Once I dropped that for a moment, I was able to get back to why, which was how surfing made me feel, how living at the surf camp made me feel, how joyous and free my life was. And those were really the whys of my time, then, as opposed to the specifics, like the details, the circumstances. And it was interesting because the moment I admitted it to myself that was what I really, really wanted to have happen, like I really wanted to stay, I felt light. I felt free. I felt easeful. Because weirdly, I hadn't solved the problem of like what exactly to do, but when I admitted it to myself, when I finally admitted that that was what I want, I didn't want to have to go back home. I didn't want to have to retreat. I didn't want to have to change again. I wanted what I was there for. The moment that I admitted that to myself, everything became a lot clearer. And it was like, oh, okay, then we are going to throw away all the options about going back home and getting surgery and all the rest of it. We're going to find alternatives. We're going to be open to an alternative. We're going to be open to the possibility that you are fine and this just needs something else you weren't considering. Because let's be honest, my ego was scared about my travels. The ego was scared about me doing things that were way outside of my comfort zone in general. And frankly, what just wanted me to scurry back with my tail between my legs and go home and be normal again. And once I was kind of like, oh, that's actually not what I want, it was as if the tides sort of like the doors opened, and I was like, there might be, I assumed that I tore my ACL. Like I assumed that I had done this injury to I obviously felt bad, and so I was fixating on like, this is what happened, and I have to solve the problem this way. There's no other way to solve this problem. And once I was willing to say like that wasn't what I wanted, then it was like there was this openness, this freedom to, well, like maybe there's actually a different solution here. Like maybe I was jumping the gun. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions here. So now it was, how do I stay? Now the focus was like, how do I stay? And one of the cooks that was there had been for days, right? I was already being presented with options, but I wasn't paying attention because I wasn't interested in them at the moment. He'd been telling me for days that I should go see a lady called the Bone Lady. And, me with my like, hyper rational, science, medicine, blah, blah, blah. I was like not willing. I was like, no, it's dangerous. I have to go to the doctors. I have to do this specific thing a certain way, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, like my swelling hadn't gone down and the doctor's advice hadn't really done much of anything. So I was finally open. I was available. Like in admitting to myself what I actually wanted to do, I was finally available to being free to see something that I hadn't seen before, hadn't been willing to consider before. So I hopped on the back of his motorcycle, and for an hour with my leg like sticking out of the side, got taken up into the mountains to this Bone Lady, who was this like wizened, like 70-year-old, basically a chiropractor up in the mountains. And she had me lie down, took one look at me, was like, she pointed out like 4 or 5 other injuries I had and was like, you seem very crooked. She pulled and she yanked and she straightened me out. And within a day, my swelling had gone down and I was walking again. And I don't think that that's magic. I think it was a lot of my perception, and that my perception of my assumption that things had to be a certain way, and importantly that I had done something specifically wrong, meant that I was fixating on it and sort of recreating that scenario in my mind. And so obviously that was what I saw. I was choosing to see it that way, and so all this is to say, if you're in that sort of stuck place and you're feeling a sense of indecision, or you're feeling conflicted about choices or options that may be presenting themselves to you, I'm using this very extreme example in my own case because I think it really highlights what I'm speaking to here very nicely, which is give yourself a moment to just ask yourself what you really want. Assuming away all of the circumstances, assume that you have that magic wand, and just really ask yourself, get quiet, get still, and just ask yourself what you actually want from this situation. Not worrying about how you're going to get there. That comes next. But just admitting to yourself first and foremost what you really want to have happen. And then allow yourself to be honest about what you actually really want. Not focusing on making it make sense, or focusing on what other people think or how it's going to work. Let that go. Just keep your heart centered on what it is that you really want, and importantly, admitting that to yourself. Admitting to yourself what you actually really want out of a situation. And then trust that the information will present itself that will lead you where you need to go. And when in doubt, if you're feeling really anxious about the choices that are being made, if you're feeling a tremendous amount of anxiety, don't listen. Give yourself more time. I know that's not always the easiest, but anxiety has become sort of the key marker for me when I'm not listening to myself, and when I'm using the judgments and rationalizations that are all external to me, like how everyone will think or how it will look or anything like that. That's when I'm being guided by my smaller self, not my higher self. So anyway, I hope this is of some use to any of you out there, and I look forward to answering more questions in the future. Okay.